This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech. Today we're going to meet Astrid Young. She's a singer, a songwriter, a sommelier, and something special.
And she comes from Canadian royalty, the daughter of writer Scott Young and half-sister of Neil.
Astrid, welcome to Believe in People.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm going to ask you something unpredictable. You're in Belleville, Ontario. What are the fall colors like outside, and what kind of a mood do they put you in?
Well, I love the fall colors, but we've had a lot of rain over the past week, so most of them are gone at this point, and it's pretty much pissing down right now. So
Oh, really?
what happens? I mean, it's been a really nice fall season, but as soon as the rain comes, it's all gone. Yeah.
So now you're hunkering down.
Mm,
Eh.
Yeah, it's over in a minute. So as in the big scheme of things, it's just seasons. I like nature. I like seasons. Change is good.
Yeah, it's so true.
Seasons change, and so do I.
That sounds
Sorry,
familiar.
that was the Guess Who.
Astrid, you grew up surrounded by, creativity, pretty big personalities too. How did you find your own voice in all that?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because I mean I've had so many varied experiences in terms of creativity and music especially. I've been playing music since I was basically a toddler and played classical music up until I didn't get into rock and roll until I was about 14 or 15. So, and inevitably, classical music is you're interpreting somebody else's compositions and things like that. So you learn phrasing and those are the things that kind of make you unique. Your phrasing, your tone, your timing, things like that. And then, getting into rock and roll because, we're so bombarded with other music and things. It was really hard. And mm, I'm big into like social experiments, and I think much more so when I was younger. As I had a lot more discipline back then. But I had a moment where I was living in Los Angeles and making demos, and you send them all the record companies and stuff like that, and I had a record label guy say, "You got a great voice." And your songs are okay, but it kind of sounds like everything else that's out there. You're going to get lost in the shuffle. So, what else you got kind of thing. And I started thinking, well, you know, maybe I'm being too influenced by the things around me and everything that I'm listening to. So my social experiment at the time was to kind of isolate myself from all media. So no radio, no television, no magazines. I didn't even look at billboards. It's like, no, I don't, you don't look at that, So I get my news of the day from like people that I would talk to and things like that. But I think most importantly, I really just stopped listening to music for a long time and just focused on my own writing. And it took probably a couple of years to really figure out who I was as an artist and what I wanted to be. And I went through a lot of evolutions at that point. I went from playing in rock bands to basically playing piano with a string quartet and got signed to Warner Brothers, lost that record deal, went on to play in more rock bands, do sessions and stuff like that. So, but I think I really know who I am as a writer and an artist because of that specific exercise that I did back then. I don't think a lot of musicians have the ability to let go of their ego enough to do that, because you can in reality, you got 8 notes and everything's been done to death, and everything that you do and you hear is kind of derivative of something else. And I don't think my music's any different. I have a lot of different influences, and people ask me what my music sounds like, and I say, well, somewhere between, David Bowie and Black Sabbath with a little bit of Kate Bush mixed in there. And I don't particularly like the process of categorization, but that's basically what it boils down to. And if you do listen to my music, you'll probably pick up a lot of things. It's just like, oh, there's oh, wait a minute. You know. I like that. I like that kind of surprising aspect of what I do. I like it that people don't know where I'm going
Yeah.
next, and kind of keep them guessing. Mhm.
Well, you sang with Neil, and I don't know if I picked up on any of Neil's sort of chord changes and things in your music, but is there any of that in there, or do you try to stay away from that?
No, he rips me off more than I rip him, actually.
I love that.
Okay, newsflash.
I joke with him about that all the time, because like things like I play my 12 string tuned down a full step, and he tuned everything down a full step for Greendale, and I went, eh.
Yeah, yeah.
He always thinks it's his idea, so this is kind of a running joke between us. That's all.
Well, that is what older brothers are for. You did have some input into War of Man, I read online,
Yeah, yeah.
which by the way is an absolute, a heart stopper of a song, the subject matter.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I came up with the parts for that one, and actually in one of the tours that we did too, I think it was in 2000, we did a lot of songs from his at that time most recent record, which was Silver and Gold, which was basically a solo acoustic record, and a lot of the songs didn't have harmonies on that, so I kind of came up with those arrangements too.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Wow.
he trusts me in that level, I guess. Well, I mean, we kind of have a lot of the same sensibilities, without really, I mean, my music obviously doesn't sound anything like his and vice versa, but I think all the years that we spent playing together, I kind of, we have this little bit of telepathy between us. We don't really have to have a lot of discussion about music. He can just kind of look at me a certain way and I know what he's thinking.
That's nice to have that brotherly, sisterly love, and that.
Yeah.
And Astrid, you mentioned, and which is true. I mean, the industry is so full of egos. How do you stay grounded?
Mm, um, I don't know. I just I the being doing what we do and being an entertainer and things like that, necessitates a fair bit of ego and putting yourself out there. And I've never really been that kind of person. So I think I just generally gravitate to doing things that feed my soul. I don't really I'm not really the kind of person that's out there going, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's just like I can't really get my head around, the things that you have to do in social media these days to kind
Yeah.
of, it's like you got to post every day, you got to make new reels, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's just like, really, who's got time to do that? I really don't, I mean, so I've made conscious decisions in my life to, when things are getting a little crazy or too busy, just to kind of take a step back and for my own sanity and things like that. Because honestly, it's like life's pretty short, and you gotta take care of the spaceship, as it were.
Hmm. But you live in Belleville. You don't live in Los Angeles. Is that part of your whole, is that part of that deal, or you just moved to Belleville for the heck of it?
Well, I left Los Angeles because my father had a stroke, and he was in the beginning stages of vascular dementia. And it was kind of a shock to me, actually, that it happened because nobody had told me that he was in the hospital or had a stroke, and it kind of freaked me out. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, I've been gone for a long time. Maybe I don't know what's going on with him. So I basically sold everything that I could sell, put the rest of it in storage, and move back to Canada just so I could be close to him, and with no real intention to stay per se. I was here for about a year and a bit, and during that time I found out I had cancer, and I was able to get into treatment here, which was great. So, and then I went back to California, but I didn't go back to Los Angeles. I moved to Napa Valley because I was also studying wine at the time. And then I was in Napa Valley for about 3, 4 years, and then I came back to Canada because my father had another decline. I just wanted to be close to him while he still remembered who I was and things like that. And he passed away in 2005. And I had kind of, at that point, really reestablished a lot of my familial connections, my cousins and old friends that I've known since I was a kid, and high school friends and things like that. And it really kind of I went, wow, I have this whole other life that I almost completely forgot about. And I think as you get older, these things start meaning more to you, the
Mhm.
connections and, the heartfelt connections. And then I met Ray in 2009, and we got married in 2011. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
think he would love to live in Los Angeles. I would not love to live in Los Angeles right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going there later this week for a few different reasons. But it's changed since I was there. I spent my 20s and 30s there, and I consider it to be my hometown in many ways, but it's a different place. It's
Yeah.
a completely different place. And after leaving Los Angeles, moving to Toronto, then moving to Picton, and then in between actually living in a small town in Napa Valley, I kind of prefer living in the country now, like, or at least in a rural setting. And Belleville's a little bit of a, compromise. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of a long story why we're here, but like I said, Ray enjoys being close to the mall and close to Canadian Tire and things like that. He's in,
Of course. That sounds Astrid,
Uh,
what
That's a newsflash.
yeah, no kidding. Canadian Tire. What about I'm interested in how did you get into wine?
um, back when I was in Los Angeles, and this goes back to when you're a musician, you can't always, the touring, everything is just so sporadic, so you have to have something in between. And I've been a bartender since I got out of high school, basically, and it's a great thing to know how to do because you can do it anywhere. It's a skill you can pick up anywhere in the world. The jobs are considered to be fairly transient, although I was lucky enough to have employers that liked me enough that I could leave for a couple of months and then come back. And so it served me well over the years. That I was getting pretty burnt out on it, like mid 90s or so. And I had a general manager that I was actually a beverage manager at this restaurant. And, I said, I gotta quit. I said, I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand looking at drunk people and just dealing with the whole bullshit you have to deal with restaurants and stuff like that. And he said, you should become a sommelier. And I went, why would I want to do that?
Huh.
And he said, well, think about it, and if you want to do a course, then we'll pay for it. And so I ended up doing that. And that was my first of three certifications. But, there was an inkling in my head that wine was probably a good thing to do. And I'm going to dial it back a little bit more. When I was in Los Angeles, I was working for an orchestra contractor. So basically, what she does is she hires orchestras to do soundtracks for, big movies and stuff like that. So we were working with some pretty big composers, and so we were on this session at Paramount, at one of the sound stages at Paramount Pictures, and we're on a lunch break at a restaurant, and a bunch of us sitting around talking about how much we hate dealing with the suits. And this guy says, well, if you want to have something in common with the suits, all you have to do is either play golf or know something about wine. And I went, well, not much of a golfer. So I went down to the newsstand the next day and bought a Wine Spectator magazine, and I read it cover to cover and realized how little I actually knew about wine. So that was kind of like my first entree into, well, maybe this is something to know about, And then a few years later, once I'd already started studying wine, I was in the studio. It was a party, actually. It was a listening party for Ron Wood. And I was actually in the studio, same studio as the Rolling Stones. So we were I was working on a record. They were working on a record. And so my band got invited to the party. And so everybody's there. Axl Rose is there. Phil Spector's there. Bob Ezrin's there. All the Rolling Stones, all these, people. You could everybody you look around, you recognize everybody, right? So I ended up standing there talking to somebody about wine, and the next thing you know, I got this crowd of people around me talking about wine, and I looked over one guy's shoulder for a second, and there's Mick Jagger sitting in the corner all by his lonesome, and I thought, I have arrived.
That's unbelievable. That's a great story.
Well, you mentioned Bob Ezra, and I don't really want to get into like politics and everything too heavily on this, but Bob Ezra moved back to Canada as well recently because of the political situation in the United States. Are you of that mindset at all, or how do you fit into all that?
Um, I like to think of myself as a peaceful nothing. I don't like talking about politics. I have too many friends that are like, everybody's got polarizing opinions, and I think there's too much animosity and hate in this world. And I think everybody is entitled to make decisions based on their own beliefs and their own comfort level and things like that. And I love the United States. I really don't think that, whatever's going now, I mean, there's some bad stuff going on there, but you know what? There's lots of bad stuff going on in the rest of the world too, like really, 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 really bad stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that as an artist too, I think the best thing that I can do is just to kind of do what I do and carry on, and hopefully what I do can help people to forget
Yeah.
Okay, so
some of
so
their
how do you
troubles in a little while.
how do you square that with what Neil has been up to lately? He's just put out
Well,
some music video.
Neil has a platform and he's using it, and both him and his wife Daryl, they have a shared passion for saving the world, and for speaking out against or speaking up about what they believe in and speaking out against what they don't, cotton to, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's him.
Yeah.
I just we have discussions about certain things, and to be quite honest, it's like I'm a little bit shocked that things have come to pass the way they did, but in reality, we got what, 3 more years of this. So
Yeah.
in the
We
big scheme
hope.
of things, it's like it goes by in a second, and that's a temporary job if you look at it in the broader sense. And it's like, I don't know, it's like you look at politics, and it's just like, is this going to change who I am? I'm not going to let it change who I am.
Right.
And that's what it boils down to. So if I want to, walk in the rain, or listen to Ram Dass or Alan Watts on a podcast, and kind of like, get deep into my head about philosophy, which I like to do. That's what I'm going to do. That's what makes me happy. And I'm going to stay away from things that make me anxious or nervous, or, I mean, I'm
It's like, it's so true. First of all, Alan Watt is my hero. And I think, and he was, a really interesting guy, but I think it helps you. It really helps put things in perspective when you hear that.
It really does. And, I've listened to all of his lectures multiple times. And, even when I listen to them now, there's always like one or two things that you
Yeah.
just go, it's just like the reason I listened to this today.
Yeah.
Ram Dass does the same for me too.
Yes.
Hmm.
Same thing. Astrid, what were you like as a kid?
I was funny, and I made up songs all the time, and I bothered the hell out of my sister. And once I started playing music, I was a bit of a show off. I really had a lot of confidence. I mean, it wasn't until my parents broke up when I was 12 that, I kind of lost the plot a little bit. But, I was basically a pretty enthusiastic kid with a lot of varied interests. I rode horses. Basically, horses and music were my thing. I mean,
Hmm.
that's all I really wanted to do. That was like that. Those two things kind of consumed me.
Hmm.
Wow.
You mentioned that you returned to Canada to be with your father in his final days or what have you. I mean, as a boy of a certain generation, I remember Scott Young being on Hockey Night in Canada. I
Yeah.
remember reading Boy on Defense, Scrubs on Skates. For a certain generation, your father was iconic to a lot of us kids, especially kids, playing the Canada's game and what have you. Um, what was he like? Was he
He was
because
amazing.
because of course we all know the stories of Neil's relationship with Scott Young because of Scott Young's book, and then there's your book, and it's sort of mentioned in Jimmy's book about Neil and Neil's book about cars and all that. But was he there? I mean, what who was your father?
Actually, I think my father was there more for me than he was for Neil. I mean, Neil and I've had discussions about this at length because, my father was just building his career when Neil was growing up and he wasn't around, I mean, back then there was no computers or anything like that. So you actually he had to physically go to the places where he could get the stories. So he was on the road a lot. He traveled quite a lot and he was in demand. They moved quite a bit, for his work. They moved to Toronto and moved around in Toronto, but it was always, specifically for Dad's work. And when I came along, Dad was pretty well ensconced in his newspaper jobs in Toronto, and he did travel a fair bit, but he was around all the time,
Mm.
and we spent a lot of time together. And he was the guy that was, I mean, he would get up and work. He would wake up usually at 5 in the morning. He would go down to the basement into his office and he would bang out his column. He'd be done by 7 o'clock, and then he'd wake me up and give me breakfast, take me to school, or if we were out in the country, he would literally, okay, so we were about 3 miles away from my horse farm where I rode, and we kept the horses on our farm. So I would ride over in the morning and he would follow me in the car at 3 miles per hour following me in the car. Patience of a saint, that man, but he really we spent a lot of time together, and he just really wanted to give me the best childhood that I possibly can. He was very supportive of especially of the music stuff. I mean, I played several different instruments and he was always okay, you want to play? He was playing flute. I played piano, and then I played flute, and then I started playing oboe. And he would always make sure that I had lessons with the best teachers, and had all the opportunities that I could possibly have to take it where it could go.
But was he that supportive of Neil's music career in the beginning?
Well, the thing is with Neil, I mean, Neil's Neil's mom, and this is complicated because Neil Neil and my brother Bob are my dad's kids from his first marriage. My mother was the other woman, okay? And then they got married, had me. So there's 16 years between me and Neil.
Mm.
He when our dad and Neil's mom, Rassie, broke up. Rassie moved to Winnipeg and Neil went with him. And Bob stayed in Toronto with dad. So most of Neil's kind of like getting into music and starting his first bands and stuff like that, he was around Rassie, and Rassie was very supportive of him, very supportive. She used to call in the radio station and say, "I heard this great band's playing at this, place tonight. You should go and see him," or request his songs when they had records and things like that. And Dad, for his part, I mean, I don't think that anybody really thought that Neil was going to make much of himself, you know. That was the consensus anyway, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was a different generation back then, right?
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
a big difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's interesting that my father, my father did not discourage him, certainly, and he was very proud of what Neil, obviously very proud of what he was able to accomplish, and he was supportive of him in the same way that he was supportive of me. I just don't really think anybody thought it was going to amount to much, and certainly not to the extent that it did.
Mm.
But my father created his career from nothing. I mean, his parents were very poor, and he saved up money working. He was working in a cigar factory and saved up his money to buy a typewriter and learned how to type, and then got a job as a copy boy on a local community paper, and then kind of moved on to sports, and that's a whole other story there. But he made something of himself out of basically nothing.
Mm.
So I think what it boils down to is, in my family, nobody ever said it's not possible. I think there was always this sense of, if you really want to do this, you should try, because it might happen, But there was none of this like, oh yeah, you're going to be a star or anything like that, because that things are just so fleeting, and so it's vapor, right? Until it's actually real, and even when it's real, it can turn to vapor. So, I mean, it's just you got to be realistic about it without losing your enthusiasm for it, and I think that's what it came down to. My dad always had a really good sense of humor about everything. Like, even when bad things happened, it was he was like, okay, well, we'll just have to do things a little differently from now on.
Good way to be. Wow. Astrid, what's your favorite part of being a musician or an artist?
I think my favorite part is getting to play with other people, and my absolute favorite thing is playing with my band, and it's there's nothing like it. There's nothing like that chemistry that you get when it's almost like an out of body experience when everybody's kind of like locked into the same vibe, and you're not even connected to what you're doing. It's almost like you're a spectator in your own show there, and so that's definitely my favorite part. And whether I'm a side person playing with another band or whether it's my band, that's what it comes down to. And I love to record too. But the recording is also a collaborative process.
Mm.
And I love doing that. If I could figure out a way to make money from just recording, I'd probably be doing that and nothing else.
Huh. Well, Nancy Wilson has been quoted as having said some very nice things about you. You've played with Nancy Wilson. Who else have you played with?
Oh, a lot of people in the studio, like, because I had a kind of life as a session musician and a background singer for a while when I was in Los Angeles. So, I've been in the studio with Johnny Cash and Jennifer Warnes and Barry Goldberg and Jerry Goffin and you know, all kinds of people.
No, that's quite.
Panorama, probably a lot of people you've never heard of before either, but you know, I wrote a song for Dwight Yoakam once,
Oh,
never ended up putting it on his record, but it was considered, I've been in good company. Let's put it
Yes. No,
that way.
no.
for
It's all
sure.
worth it.
Exactly. Astrid, this is called Believe in People. And apart from your dad, who's someone who kind of believed in you before you believed in yourself?
I had a music teacher when I was in high school. I was actually in 10th grade, but I was taking 12th grade high school because I had moved from Toronto to Peterborough. And I came from a very, very high level music program there. And so the school that I was going to in Peterborough, the music teacher there was incredible. And I was so full of myself. I was so full of myself. I'd been playing in like top chamber groups and orchestras as an oboe player in Toronto. I had, my teacher was the first oboe in the Toronto Symphony. So here I am in this like what I, kind of like this podunk school where the other oboe player was playing a plastic horn with fiber cane reeds, and I was just appalled. And it was like, oh my God, where have they put me? I'm on another planet. But despite that, his name is Peter Ford, and he challenged me. He challenged me to be better. He challenged me to step up and kind of see that I could take a leadership position without being, so full of myself, and to step into, my potential, as opposed to just feeling like that I was apart from everybody else. And that's it really changed me in so many different ways. And he actually called me in at the end of the year, and he sat me down and he says, I just want to talk to you about your final mark. And I said, okay. And he says, I gave you 99%. And I went, oh, that's pretty good. And he goes, you want to know why I didn't give you 100%? And I said, I wasn't going to ask, but sure, why? Tell me. And he says, it's music. Nobody's perfect.
That's good.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for spending a half an hour with us. Aren't
Thank
we supposed to be your brother, half brother Neil? What isn't it his birthday this year? Doesn't he not have some special birthday?
Yeah, that's why I'm going to Los Angeles. It's next Thursday. Yeah, next
Very good.
Is it
Wednesday.
a milestone? A milestone birthday?
What's
I
that?
believe
Is it a milestone
I
birthday?
believe it's number 80.
Yeah, yeah,
Ah, very good.
yeah.
Number 80. Well, I trust you'll be opening a fine bottle of something when
Maybe.
you're in Los
I don't know.
Angeles.
He's having a party at the studio, so I'm sure there'll be wine there, but you know, yeah.
That's nice. Astrid, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having
Really
me.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Keep on rocking in the
All
freeway.
right. Always.
Well, Kev, you know what I love about Astrid is she's so like down to earth and really has a great perspective on life. You know,
Mhm.
it's true, life is too short, and she's so multi-talented.
Well, of course, I was drawn to her because of the history in her family. I grew up reading her dad's books. I grew up with Neil's music. I saw her in, Heart of Gold singing there at the Ryman Auditorium. So it really has been a real pleasure for me to meet her for the first time and talk to her. And yeah, her 2 feet are firmly planted on the ground, no matter what she's doing. And
Yeah.
she speaks so matter-of-factly about it that I actually find that refreshing. So thanks, Astrid.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Believe in People. Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.